All right, Stephanie Rome. I feel like we've been very excited about this topic because it's tied into all the things and all the conversations we've had in the years that we've known each other. So it's going to be really fun to dive in to digestion with you. Welcome back to the Body Awareness Project.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Can't wait
Yeah,
to get into it.
I know both of us were talking before we hit record of how excited this topic makes us because it's something that is so foundational for everyone. And I would love if you could just start with sharing your own story
Yeah,
of being body aware.
for sure. So I guess I'll just back up and just say so I'm a holistic nutritionist and I do work with clients one-on-one, mostly just in developing healthy and sustainable nutrition and lifestyle habits. But my passions and specialties include digestion and gut health. So this is a super fun topic for me. And then I also work with a lot of women to heal hormonal imbalances and optimize their fertility. And that kind of does all tie into my story because that's sort of where I've struggled the most with a lot of gut health, a lot of hormone health issues. So I guess when I first became body aware, I'd say is when I got off the birth control pill and didn't get a period for 2 years. So that was definitely a big call for me in terms of my hormones obviously being out of whack and my overall health were definitely not optimal. So in addition to the amenorrhea, which is just like a fancy word for no periods, I also had lots of gut problems. So specifically for me, it was mainly constipation, tons and tons of bloating. And around that time, I was also getting lots of UTIs and yeast infections. And then I got on that vicious cycle of you get a UTI, you take an antibiotic, then you get a yeast infection, then you're kind of back. It just decimated my gut health, with all the antibiotics. I was also on antibiotics for my skin in high school. So it just was a total antibiotic kid and was on the pill, of course. So that all coupled with my high school, college, very unhealthy diet and drinking excessively, eating way too much sugar, my gut was really not too happy with me. So anyway, I ended up seeking out a natural practitioner who totally opened my eyes to the world of holistic health and healing. And she just taught me so much about the body's power, the body's ability to heal itself, just given the right resources. So cleaning up your diet, doing the proper amount of exercise, not over exercising, managing your stress, prioritizing sleep, etc. So that just really triggered me to make a major lifestyle change. And I became so passionate about health that I ended up deciding to go back to school and study nutrition and became a certified holistic nutritionist. And I've been in practice now for 4.5 years. I'm also now in grad school getting my master's in clinical nutrition. So this career path is totally my life's work, I think. I just love working with clients and helping my clients transform their health. So super happy to be here today chatting with you because I do feel gut health is so foundational to optimal health. So can't wait to jump in.
Yeah. And we're lucky to have you because I do think, especially what we're going to talk about besides culprits of bloat and how to really improve just with food, but also this awareness that we want everyone to take away from this project. What you said is also your expertise with hormones and what we've talked about before in the adrenals course about PCOS and about, how many of us have these hormonal imbalances and we're just putting a Band-Aid of birth control or whatever it might be on top of it. And so understanding the root really can come back to digestion is just so powerful and gut health function. So we're glad to have you. Oh no, I lost my light. Let's start by talking about common culprits of bloat. And really, this is the number one reason that I'm so glad that this project is existing, because the amount of bloat that exists, everyone has bloat. I feel like when I look at, if I post something or if I do a podcast about something, the number one question is, I am bloated and how do I help with this? So let's just jump into common causes of bloat and really what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree. Bloating is probably the most common complaint among clients who I see, like both from the digestive perspective, but also from hormones. So it's like bloat in all areas, and bloating sucks. I've been there. I mean, I still get some bloat sometimes, but it's not like the chronic. Can't like you're just you wake up bloated, you go to sleep bloated, your clothes don't fit, you like sometimes it's accompanied with like gas and pain and funky bowel movements and stuff. So, bloating can be a bit of like a harbinger of more serious gut health issues, but sometimes it's actually like pretty benign and simple to fix. So I figured today we would just like kind of chat through some of those common culprits and
Perfect.
obviously what people can do about it if they are dealing with a lot of bloat. So I figured let's just maybe start with like the what that people are eating. Like, so the what you're eating, maybe the top 7 foods that make people bloated, some of which are more obvious than others. But this was kind of the list that I feel like I see most often as the ones to cut if you're chronically bloated.
Yeah.
So number 1 is probably like no surprise, gluten, hands down, no contest. This is going to be like the biggest dietary culprit of bloat. I feel like, there's so much we could say about that. Most people could probably already know it. Like they've probably been told that before or read that somewhere or heard it from you or something. So just getting rid of the gluten-filled carbs and pastas and stuff can do the trick. Another like major bloat culprit I see a lot is dairy, because like for 65% of adults, I think that's the number at like this stage, are lactose intolerant. So that's going to lead to a lot of gas, a lot of bloating, usually like just abdominal pain, loose stool, etc. So that's one thing. But also, even if you're not lactose intolerant, dairy sensitivity is also really common, super common with like leaky gut and stuff. So dairy would be another one to experiment with getting rid of. Sugar, for sure. So sugar is going to feed the bad bacteria, which will power the beneficial bacteria in your gut. So,
Yeah.
and this, I don't know how like super scientific this is, but I think about like the gut having this ratio of like mostly good. So like, let's say 85% good bacteria to like, you're always going to have some sort of commensal and bad bacteria. So let's say 15% bad, but sometimes that ratio kind of like flips. And so people have a lot of bad bacteria and they have a lot of symptoms like gas and bloating. So I do find that like many of my clients will eliminate their bloating when they remove refined sugar from their diet.
And also sugar alcohols,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
That is something that they're snuck in so easily without even noticing, especially in this phase of keto. If they're sugar alcohols, they're not counted as net carb, right? So
Right.
that's a low carb phenomenon of like, okay, I'm like I'm eating these really clean things and they low carb and I'm trying my best to be healthy and maybe I've already cut gluten, yet still here I am with bloat. And so it's really that sugar alcohol as well of digging into those ingredients.
Totally. That was actually my 4th one is gum, because
Ah,
gum
yeah,
is so full of sugar alcohols.
yeah.
And some people like, I just find I'm like, just simply ask the question, like, do you chew gum? And they're like, oh yeah, I chew like half a pack of gum a day. I'm like, well, that's why you're bloated for sure. Like,
God,
stop
that's
chewing gum.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah. Just
it's
have
just
one piece.
yeah, it's habitual. So it's like finding that there are so many fancy new gums I've seen, but I haven't found one. I don't know. There's just definitely people that love gum.
Yeah, I know. And so that was kind of where I was coming from with the gum and the sugar alcohols, but definitely like in a lot of these new keto products, as you were saying, like even some of the, like a lot of granola bar or protein bars
Hmm.
will have these sugar alcohols. So just being mindful of like anything that ends in, isn't it
OL.
like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
xylitol or
Oh,
something like that, or yeah. And then another kind of like gums pretty under the radar, but like another under the radar bloat food is the food stabilizer carrageenan.
hmm.
So that's found usually in like foods like ice cream or non-dairy yogurt or almond milk. Actually, they're starting to remove it in a lot of like the healthier almond milks, but carrageenan's basically used to like create a thicker like dairy-like texture. So that's why they'll use it in non-dairy like almond milks and yogurts and stuff.
Yeah.
But not only does it cause a lot of bloat, it can also cause a lot of gut inflammation and intestinal permeability. So that's definitely one to avoid. Read your alternative milk labels because
Yes.
there's a lot of good ones that are now removing it.
I love that. Yeah. I don't know if, even if it's, I think they say it's from seaweed. So you're like, okay, that must mean it's healthy. And then all of a sudden it's still causing issues. So that's great. That's a really good awareness for sure.
Yeah, and then cruciferous veggies. I mean, I put that on there like all the bloat culprits I've listed up until now are not foods that you like need in your diet. They're not doing you any favors on the health front.
Mhm.
But cruciferous veggies like kale and broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and all of that are actually super good for you. But they do contain a starch called raffinose that can be really tough to digest and lead to like a lot of gas production in the colon. So I'm not necessarily recommend that people like avoid them, but unless you're following like a low FODMAP diet. But if you know they're not working for you, then we need to just maybe limit it. So like small doses, not having like, a massive bowl of cauliflower rice or something like that, just having little bits here and there and just like build up your tolerance over time. And maybe just take some digestive enzymes with the meal or drizzle some lemon juice over it just to sort of stimulate digestive enzyme production so you can deal with all the starch and other stuff in cruciferous veggies. Do you see that one?
A lot, and I always think what's interesting is it's so frustrating because it's like, well, I'm trying to eat healthy and
Yeah.
I'm eating these are the most common things, like even the California medley, frozen bag, like this is something easy and accessible. And when you're looking at things like Brussels sprouts or you're looking at things like cauliflower rice, which is such a great alternative, it's so quickly is frustrating for anybody that's like, are you kidding me? Like I'm doing everything that you say to, and yet still I have this. So it's like almost a WTF moment that everyone I think has experienced, but this is something real that I am extremely sensitive to. And I'm never, at first it was like, is it the enzymes? Is it the HCl? And what I found is like, I have to cook roasted veggies for probably 50 to 75 minutes in order for it to knock that out for me. And
Yeah.
it's not, I can totally overdo the Brussels sprouts at some point, right? If I have too many of them. But I have found overcooking them, not like I've tried steaming them, even like quick little microwaves. If it's a fast technique of the way I cook it, it completely destroys me. But
Really?
if I change that and I make sure that I hit like 55 minutes of roasted veggies, then broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts actually do okay. So that was my own test on my own. So I think I was curious if you've heard that or if you've tried that with some clients to see if you have noticed that change a little bit.
No, that's such a good tip with like the length of time because
Mhm.
I always recommend cooking. Like I really don't ever recommend eating those veggies raw. There's just no need to. They're
Yeah.
not even good. Like
No.
they're not good raw. So it's like,
Unless it's like the broccoli slaw that your grandma made for
yeah,
barbecue.
totally. But it's like, that's like covered in mayonnaise so you don't taste it. But like, yeah, I mean, just always cook your kale. Like if, for example, if you're like eating tons of kale salads every day for lunch and getting super bloated, like try kale once you've like made it into kale chips or steamed it for a while or sauteed it for like until it's like soft and a lot of that starch and roughage is like broken down.
For sure. And I did learn a trick with kale and with those kind of really thick greens is to massage before, like take some oil and massage them and really break them up. Even if you are going to eat them in a salad, it can help kind of make it a little bit more permeated with whether it's a little lemon juice or like you said, or any sort of salad dressing that you're going to do. You can actually see it start to relax a little bit, I
Yeah.
guess. And it seems crazy, but you're basically just giving your body the ability to break it down quicker
Yeah,
without
yeah, totally.
as much support. You mentioned FODMAPs, and just in case this is, they're jumping in right to you, what is FODMAPs? What is a low FODMAP? What does that even mean?
Yeah, totally. So FODMAPs is an acronym. It stands for, let me see if I can get this. Okay, so fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides,
Monosaccharidase.
monosaccharides, and polyols. Do we get it? Yeah.
Boom.
So basically, that's just like a really long-winded way of saying fermentable sugar. So it's a bit basically like specific types of sugar that aren't fully digested in your gut are then excessively fermented by the bacteria in your microbiome. So that food fermentation process by the microbes releases usually hydrogen or methane gas that can lead to a distension of your intestines. So like bloat to the max. So if you're eating really clean, like we were saying, but still experiencing bloating, you can start to look out for these like higher FODMAP foods. Cauliflower being one of them for sure, like onions and garlic are two big ones for quite a few people. Asparagus, beans, apples, etc. And usually if you do have a FODMAP intolerance or you're just really sensitive to high FODMAP foods, then it can be caused by an underlying gut problem like SIBO or something like that.
Yeah. And that was the last thing I was going to say about like this constant chronic, every vegetable I eat, not necessarily cruciferous. That's something that I always have felt like, okay, if you're getting bloated because of a regular salad, we need to look at something like SIBO and, which is a whole hour conversation in and of itself. Right.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say, you've got somebody.
Yeah. we got a couple people for sure.
Okay, cool.
God, that is such a frustrating thing, but definitely more and more common. And we're going to keep seeing it become more common if we don't get this gut flora balance in check. So yeah, that's a great one.
So
and I love this. I love this last one you picked. Yeah. The final of your list is kombucha, which I think is so important to talk about. So I'm really glad you brought this up. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So most people probably know kombucha is like kind of all the rage, but it is like a fermented tea. It contains probiotics, but it also often contains pretty high levels of sugar, certainly depending on the brand, but just in general, it's going to be higher in sugar. And so while I am a fan, like I do believe that fermented foods are essential to a healthy gut microbiome, moderation is super key. So most people I find are drinking way too much kombucha. Like I would consider a serving 4 ounces. Most kombucha is sold in like a 16-ounce bottle. So people drink the whole bottle in one go and they feel super bloated. So essentially,
or a little tipsy too.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like sort of, I don't know, like lightheaded or something.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, sometimes like if I'll ask people like, they're like, I drink kombucha. I know it's great for my gut, blah, blah, blah. But if we can just limit the intake to like the 4 ounces, or that would be like a fourth of the bottle in one sitting, the bloating goes away. So it's really more of like a tolerance or like just a moderation approach than it is like that it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just kind of dependent on the dose. But for some people, like if they are dealing with like a yeast overgrowth, something like a candida overgrowth or something, I wouldn't then recommend kombucha. I would say eliminate that, because the probiotics are coming from like a SCOBY, which is basically like a yeast, like a ball of yeast. So the yeast can sort of feed the yeast in your gut if you're dealing with those types of issues.
Yeah. And it's again, one of those, like, I'm trying to do all the things that are right, yet, here we are. And I think one thing I would love to address before we kind of get into, we're on the what makes us bloated. If someone is like, I think most of us have tried cutting gluten, but what is that process of the psychological component of taking foods out of your diet that have, there's just a lot of stress that comes from taking foods out, especially if you feel like you're trying things for the first time and feeling like there's certain foods that like, it feels like sometimes, hey, this is like death if you take this out. So what would you say when it comes to trying to take these out without feeling like it's running your life or that we're consumed by these foods? You know, we want to have that balance of just living our life, but also finding these culprits. What's some advice about elimination diets in general, or taking out something like gluten for the first time, if that's a really terrifying topic or a really terrifying thought for somebody?
Yeah, so my approach typically is, like, for example, if I was seeing a client for the first time, I would certainly not start with an elimination diet right out of the gate, right? That's way too overwhelming for someone to have a list of foods that they can't eat. Um, Instead, I sort of take a more gentle approach and say, like, let's just start to crowd things out
Hmm.
by adding good things in. So, for example, like, okay, if you're typically eating breakfast that's like full of gluten, like you might be eating a muffin or pancakes or toast or cereal or something like that. Well, then we can talk about three other like go-to breakfasts that just happen to not contain gluten, but we're not saying you're not allowed to eat gluten. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's kind of like, let's just try these things. And then you sort of find that, like, oh, I feel better when I eat that. I
Mm-hmm.
have more like balanced energy. My mood's better. I feel like just overall everything went really well. And so then
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of more motivated to continue, as
Yeah.
opposed to feel like you just have to walk around with your list of foods that are no's.
Love that. That's great.
So the crowding out principle is, I feel like, a great place to start.
That's perfect. I like that approach. So we have kind of the standard what's, and then we need to kind of look at another mechanism that is huge, I think, for what you talk about with your clients, and same for anybody, is like there's more than just the foods we eat. It's how we eat our foods. I would love if we could jump into that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of times it's not what you're eating that's causing the bloat, it's the how. So many of us are like eating on the go,
Mm-hmm.
walking to a meeting, driving to work, typing emails, scrolling Instagram. It's like you're always doing something else while you're eating your meal, and being kind of go, go, go all the time means that you're going to be in your sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. That's a problem,
Mm-hmm.
because our digestive function only works properly or optimally when we're in rest and digest mode, which is like the parasympathetic state of the nervous system. So eating on the go or when you're multitasking means that your just proper digestive function doesn't really happen. Your brain doesn't communicate with the gut very well. So those digestive juices don't get produced in the right amounts. Things end up sitting around for a while, not getting broken down. And then that's going to lead to gas and bloating. So it's this whole cascade that happens if you're not kind of in the right state
Mm-hmm.
for digestion. So the solution is mindful eating, or just distraction-free eating, basically. I mean, I say that, like, eating mindfully basically just means taking the time to actually like sit down at a meal. Ideally, you would put away your phone or like your laptop or your TV or whatever, and just like, maybe I'll tell people to take a couple of deep breaths before they begin their meal, just to sort of like sit, chill, give yourself a couple of breaths, and then start eating, and make a big effort to actually chew thoroughly, like until the food's liquefied before you swallow it. A lot of people, like when they start, like some people will count or whatever if that works for them, but really it's just like not swallowing chunks of food, like
I'm
swallowing,
so guilty of
like
this.
using your teeth to do what they're supposed to do, and like put your fork down between bites, right? Like
Mm.
a lot of times, like especially during the week, we're eating alone because we're all at work doing our own thing, and it's just like shovel.
Yeah.
Enough, you don't look up, you don't chew, you don't breathe, you're just like shoveling food. So
Yeah.
just mindful eating, or whatever we want to call it, like just calm, relaxed eating, is like really important for optimal digestion, but it also really helps with like enjoying the experience of eating. Like
Mm.
if you've made yourself this really clean, awesome, delicious meal, then like you get to enjoy it. And that also contributes to better like satiety. You know, you
Mhm.
feel you finish the meal and you're not like wanting a piece of chocolate or needing a snack an hour later, that kind of thing. So There's a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I love that. I find like sometimes people, and I'm guilty of this too, like it almost feels like it's stuck, like you can't swallow well.
Yeah.
And then when you feel like you gag easily, those are all really telltale signs of being in a sympathetic state. So we can catch ourselves very quickly. Oh, wait, I am in fight or flight and my body has lived in this and this is my new normal. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of a hard process to like know what that doesn't feel like. And so it really is this, and I have this theory that like, and you can let me know what you think of it too, but like when you sit down with meals and have like a engaging conversation and you're just enjoying the food for what it is with good conversation and good people, it actually is so much better to have those cheat meals and those sneaky foods that we're not crazy about being completely dairy free or avoiding all sugar, because if we're just even sitting and being present with our food, it's more natural for our body to break it down even better. So it's on the go. And these foods is when we get to that like horrible place of like, what just happened to my body? But when we're less stressed, there's so much digestion that happens that we're allowed to get away with some of these things because we have the ability to. So I think that's great to understand like how we're all guilty of it, but distraction while eating is like, it's got to stop.
Gotta stop. And again, it's the same principles as like, you don't have to start doing 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. I mean, just pick one meal that you'll commit to like sitting at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and then you kind of build your way up and you're like, oh, wow, I feel so much better now that I've done that. And again, the habits just end up like you become more motivated when you actually see that it's working. So I would just say like pick breakfast or pick dinner or something and just make sure that you're trying this mindful eating and see how it goes.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. And then this is also where the kind of last piece of like, when we know we're eating something we shouldn't, or we're like getting out of our box of what we usually eat, our normal, or we're eating on the go, that's when that digestive support can be so helpful when we're just not sure what we're eating or how we're eating it, whether it's enzymes or HCl or like the lemon. When you're at the restaurant, squeeze a lemon in your mouth or take a shot of apple cider vinegar. That can be really helpful.
For sure. Totally. Do you want to talk about the when?
Yes.
So we've talked about the what, the how, now the when.
Yes.
So something I kind of often say to my clients is that like your gut has a bedtime.
I love that.
And it's basically just like, it's the muscular contractions of the GI tract are tied to the light and dark cycle. So that's like your circadian rhythm. And it's going to be most active during the day when the sun's up, least active at night after it sets. So the problem is, especially in like Western culture, is that nighttime is when most people are consuming the majority of their calories, right? They don't eat that much during the day because they're busy or doing whatever. And then they come home and just like gorge at night.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, after like filling up a really like sleepy tummy with food at night, you're then just like sitting on the couch or laying in your bed or something. And you don't really have the benefit of gravity and movement to help transport things from like north to south. So eating large meals at night, I do find is a pretty surefire way to feel bloated. So I'd say the fix then would be to try to eat your larger meals earlier in the day when your stomach's more active and your smallest meal at night. So a really great dinner is something like a bone broth based veggie soup or something along those lines that's like still filling. You can still get your protein and your veggies and your healthy fats and stuff, but it's so much easier to digest when it's like in a liquid base, right? Like it's in a broth. All the veggies are like cooked very thoroughly, that kind of thing. And then impose a dinner curfew. Like ideally you close the kitchen, stop eating 2 to 3 hours before you want to go to bed. So ideally, for example, if your bedtime was 10, you would finish dinner by like 7, 8 at the latest. Which also, yeah, I mean, I work till 7. So I feel like by the time I get home and eat something, like it is probably 8. But I just try, like, on the night, say that you're getting home later, I just like try to have a soup in the fridge. So all I have to do when I get home is like heat it up and eat it versus like, cook some meal from scratch or something.
Yeah. And especially in this healing stage, right? Like when all of us are constantly bloating, trying to find this bloat, what's causing what and what is going on with me and my body. We'll talk about healing foods in a second, about bone broth too, but like it is just so good to give your body time off, right? We have so much snacking, we have so much stress, we have so much, it just, everything in our life is go, 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 and calories and macros. And it's just good to remember just what you said. It's like your body, when you sleep, is meant for restoration. It's meant to rejuvenate. And when it's so worried about digestion, that always will take second place, right? It will not be as beneficial. And so you can notice, even if you just take a couple of those days doing those lighter dinners to know if it's for you or not, notice how your stools are the next day and see how you feel. I think that's a perfect, that's great advice, especially if someone hasn't tried that before. It's a really cool way to see it. Maybe I have been putting too much in me at night and I just haven't had the ability to get it through my system the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's easier said than done because a lot of times people are finally like home from work and they do want to have that meal and like sit and enjoy it. But it's all a little bit of a trial and error experimentation process. I would just say, like, if you are finding that your bloating gets pretty severe in the evenings, then having a big heavy meal at 8 o'clock at night is not going to help that. So instead, like, maybe try the veggie bone broth kind of soup thing and just see how you feel. A little bit of an experiment.
That's good. I love that. And then what are some kind of talks moving into the digestive dysfunctions that can cause bloat? And, that we have the foods that are kind of typical and maybe the rhythms that we're used to. But if we take one step further and we're already doing the bone broth dinner and I don't eat gluten, I don't eat dairy, like all of these things. What are your most common digestive dysfunctions that you see with your clients?
So one is like an upper GI issue, which would be low stomach acid production. So it's quite a few people do actually produce too little stomach acid, which can wreak pretty serious havoc on the rest of your digestion. So in order for your stomach to do its job, it needs to be highly, highly acidic. If it's not, it will slow down the other digestive functions. So your pancreas doesn't get triggered to release the enzymes to continue breaking down the food in the small intestine. The gallbladder won't secrete the bile that's necessary for emulsifying dietary fat. So it creates this situation in which there's like partially digested food stuck in your gut for far too long. And that's like a cue for bloat.
Yeah.
So basically, like, if you feel like that could be an issue for you, I think you said this earlier, but you can support your stomach acid production by having a little diluted shot of apple cider vinegar before, like 15 minutes before a meal. So diluted, I mean like not taking it out of the bottle, doing like 2 to 4 ounces or something of water, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and just sort of like get it down, maybe while you're getting your dinner or getting your lunch organized or something. And that'll really help with just giving you a gentle boost. Especially, I would say that's especially important if you're having a meal that contains animal protein versus versus like, having a smoothie, probably less necessary than if you're having like red meat or something like that. And then there's always going to be more severe cases of hypochlorhydria. That's like low stomach acid. So I would just recommend chatting, with some sort of healthcare practitioner before supplementing betaine HCl on your own, just because it's super important to find the right dose and stay consistent while your body is kind of like relearning the process of making the right amount of stomach acid on its own.
Yeah. And understanding, because there's always that case of potentially H. pylori or acid reflux that would just kind of traumatize your system a little bit more. So but I love Betaine Plus, which is the stomach acid in a bottle.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And it is so bio-individual what that dose is. And it's cool because your body learns very quickly to recreate its own. So it's not one of those forever supplements unless it's kind of nice to have if you ate way too much or ate something weird. But yeah, I love that advice.
And I love that it's like self-limiting, right? Like you kind of like, if you're starting at 4 capsules and all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I need 3. And like, it just, your body like basically guides you and weaning off of it, which is really cool. But that's also another reason why, like, I just think it's best to like work with someone if you're trying that for the first time, especially I would like disclaimer, don't use it if you have any kind of like history of like peptic ulcers or anything like that.
Yes.
That would be not a good situation, but
yeah.
But yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, I use it pretty often and it is really helpful, but it's just something that's like a little bit more sort of next level. So I'd say like starting with the apple cider vinegar is so benign and like anybody can do that.
For sure.
Yeah. And another digestive dysfunction is like leaky gut. So I think that like leaky gut, food triggers and sensitivities go hand in hand, both of which are going to be root causes in a lot of people's bloat. So when the gut is like leaky or hyperpermeable, undigested food particles are going to like make their way out of the digestive tract and into your bloodstream. And that just is going to cause this response from your immune system because suddenly there's like things in the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And so the immune system will produce these antibodies towards the invaders, which is like the food you just ate. And in turn, that can lead to food sensitivities. So now every time you eat that certain food, the body's going to like launch this attack and you're going to get the symptoms. So as I said, bloating is a really common symptom if you have leaky gut or you have food sensitivities. And unless you really work on healing the gut, this just keeps happening and you'll just keep having issues like bloating after your meals. So
that's so good. And all of a sudden your foods that you've ate forever, you start to react to, you know, and you're like, wait, now I have to take out this.
Right.
I have to take out this.
A lot of times, and people like if they bring their food sensitive, like they might have like run a food sensitivity report on their own. You know, there's all these like direct to consumer stuff now, which is awesome. But their food sensitivity report will come back with like pages of foods that they're sensitive to, and it's like you're not actually like really. It's not like that's an allergy. Or it's the fact that you just have leaky gut and everything's leaking out and your immune system's just in like hyper overdrive dealing with all of this stuff that shouldn't be out in the bloodstream. And that's why the food sensitivity panel is coming back with like blueberries and dill and like all these weird things that it's like, if we just healed your gut, this would all be sorted out.
Yeah. And it's so cool that you can incorporate those foods post healing in many cases. You know, for me, there's some foods that will always trigger it. And I just know I got to stay away from it or supplement accordingly if I do have them. But it is so encouraging to know that like, okay, if I had this food sensitivity test or if I bloat when I have everything on the kitchen counter or in the, you know, cabinet, it's so great to know that there's ways to incorporate it back into your life.
Totally. Like, if I was just going to say, we'll walk through the, like the leaky gut repair protocol in a bit, but oftentimes people who have a bunch of food sensitivities who go through that protocol, they can then reintroduce most, if not all those foods back in with no issues. So there's totally like hope that you're not going to have a list of foods that you're sensitive to. It's just, that's a sign. I feel like that's just a very clear sign that like you've got some leaky gut, just needs to get healed up.
Yep, for sure. And then last but not least of other things that you see, you wrote bacterial imbalances. And gosh, I feel like that, how would you know, like, what does that look like to somebody? And I feel like all of us kind of have that in some way, just based on our environment and our stress levels, bacterial imbalances. Where would you go with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think of it like when your gut army, if you will, is like out of balance with like that large number of bad bacteria that's like crowding out the good bacteria. That's just kind of like grouped into a condition called dysbiosis. So dysbiosis can just be lots of bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria. It could also, a bacterial imbalance could involve SIBO, can involve candida overgrowth. And, you know, there's a lot of subtleties, but there's ways of like sort of determining whether that's an issue for you based on symptoms. And of course there's tests and stuff, but I do find that these issues require pretty specific and customized like treatment protocols. So I just, again, recommend working with someone, like working with a healthcare practitioner if you suspect that bacterial imbalance is an issue for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's so smart, especially with how many there can be and how bio-individual it is.
For sure.
I love it. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Yeah, of course.